This is Matthew, host of the Superhero Ethics Podcast, and I've got an ethical question for you. If I'm trying to help you not listen to ads, is it ethical for me to do an ad to help you do that? If you go to our website, theethicalpanda.com, and just click on the join button, for $5 a month, $55 a year, you get to hear all of our episodes without ads. Was I ethical in doing this? Let me know. Welcome back, sports fans, to the Superhero Ethics Podcast. And yes, I know most of you may think sports ball. What are we talking about? But we are just a few days past opening day of the Major League Baseball season. The World Baseball Classic certainly captured a lot of people's attention. There's a lot going on in the world of sports. We have some NBA news that's happening that's raising some ethical eyebrows. I am wearing a shirt for one of my Mets heroes, Bo Bichette, of the rental variety. Paul is trying to show me something.
Bo Bichette? Where? Oh, I'm holding up a blue notepad next to my orange shirt.
Yes,
in solidarity
for the New York Mets, because the only ethical choice to make in baseball is not to root for the New York Yankees.
Correct.
There's a lot of places where people can go and talk about sports, and eventually there's going to be a place where Paul and I do it, because there's just podcasting is like a singularity. It just keeps sucking you in more and more. But there are a whole bunch of ethical questions that surround baseball and surround sports in general. And so, Paul, let me just ask you. We've talked on this topic before, and you've often made very clear that you are not a fan. You are a observer. You are
enthusiast, I think.
How would you describe your relationship to baseball this year?
I am an enjoyer of baseball who actively follows the New York Metropolitans, as two of the people I love the most and talk to the most do as well. And I have a long history of having grown up with, some of my fondest memories are like Mets memories, are baseball memories as a kid. Yeah. So there's an indelible mark that has been left on me by baseball, and not by the one that hit me in the chin on an inside the infield grand slam that my team gave up because I got knocked out playing third base on a hot grounder, and there's just all the runners just scored, and everyone's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I'm like, "Where's the ball? Where's the ball?" My chin says NY actually in scars. True story.
Really?
Kind of, yeah.
At the end of every year, you always say you're not really going to be involved, and I talk to you a lot about it. So I'm glad knowing that your mother also does so that I'm only one of your two dealers in this particular addiction. So I'll only take half responsibility there. But there's an incredible amount of money that is spent on this. Money that an awful lot of people think should be spent on different things. Why are we fans of this? Or how do we justify that?
Well, first of all, I don't spend any money on it. I allow other people to spend money on it and then share the benefits of that with me. So that's my sort of soft boycott. And I mean that.
I was gonna say, so you're still living in your mother's house, and your mother's paying for your baseball, but you're mostly paying for the house, so that maybe doesn't quite.
Yes, my mother's living in my house, although we're all buying it together as a family, really. But and yes, she is supplying me with my baseball. But we had an alternate vendor last year that supplied that got her hooked, and then this year she's like, "Well, I'm not going to go without baseball."
That was me last year. So
which I will say, at the end of last year, I wasn't the only one who was like, I'm not the Mets had an eventful offseason that left many fans kicking and screaming. And somehow I was the one who was like, well, actually, when you look at it on paper.
And that's part of what we'll get back to is there's an emotional masochism that sometimes goes into being a fan that we'll discuss a bit as well. But yeah, just in terms of what are the benefits you think of this, given that there is an incredible amount of social and economic resources that are, I think, rightly pointed out by a lot of people to be kind of too much.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, like if we look specifically at Major League Baseball, right, it is a cartel of billionaires who have a monopoly on the highest level of the sport that is actually enforced by the government. And some degree, there's an exception to the antitrust laws, right?
Yeah. Baseball actually has a special antitrust exemption that the NFL does not have, that the NBA does not have, that no others, and that's
right. And that's why you got the XFL, right?
Yes, we get the XFL. Yeah. That's why you had the American Football League was completely separate from the NFL, and then they merged. Now you have the NFC and the AFC. None of that can happen under baseball because they have a legalized monopoly.
Yeah, and I mean there are independent leagues. In fact, in where I'm living, there are the Lancaster Barnstormers, which is funny. And Mets current pitcher Hector Huáscar Brazoban pitched for them, which is kind of funny. Just like there are these like little leagues, but not little leagues, but like it's in terms of like the money, I see it in a few ways. Like obviously these are these are large entertainment corporations is really what they are.
Right.
But they also function like regional religions.
Yeah.
Is the way I see it.
Yeah.
And I think the economics of that are extremely messed up, particularly in terms of like the way they basically blackmail cities into trying to invest hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into building stadiums for these private owners, private owners of businesses. So I think that's all very messed up. I will then say a ton of the money goes to the players.
Yep.
Right. Which it doesn't necessarily go to the players in a way that is distributed equitably. Right. Tons of it goes to the highest paid players.
Right.
But out of the money going to the players, I think a lot of players, especially players coming from Latin America, players coming from maybe less affluent areas of the United States and maybe Canada, have a tendency to give a lot back to their community,
I read
to establish academies.
That the amount of money that was invested in the Dominican Republic by Dominican baseball players was like 5 times, was like the single largest source of U.S. money going to the Dominican Republic, including like the direct aid we were giving before Trump cut that kind of thing, by a factor of 5 or 10,
right?
Like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is great, and I think it does create economic opportunity for people who grow up in areas where they don't have a lot of economic opportunity. And I think that opportunity being like, you can play a game you love for a lot of money. Like, I think that's cool. As somebody who plays a game I love for less money, but enough to live on, and I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a baseball player. Like that was my dream. I wanted to be Dwight Gooden. I wanted to be an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, rookie sensation. And, and by the time I was 20, I was like, I felt a little bit like I'd failed because I hadn't been super successful because like the person that I was most kind of looking up to as a little kid had like been amazingly successful at 19 and 20, There's an interesting quote by Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, the Japanese American, and I forget where her dad's from. But tennis player about, she's got like a Netflix special actually that when it came out, I was thinking like we could maybe podcast on that. We didn't, fine. But she has a quote about like feeling like when she was like 22 or 23, like feeling like a failure, feeling like she was washed up, that she'd only won like 1 or 2 majors. Like, how few people win any majors? Like, and so, yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, basically when it comes to the economics.
For sure. And
there's a lot.
It's funny when you said Gooden, I went through this whole mental train because my first thought was going to be to make a joke about how, well, I'm kind of glad because that means you didn't get addicted to cocaine and like terrible things in your early 20s. But then I was like, I don't want to make that joke. I don't want to like, there's a lot of social circumstances that went into that. Like, if you want to have an understanding of race in America in the 1980s, look at the careers of Dwight Gooden and Roger Clemens and what they were both exposed to and the way they were both talked about. There's a whole lot of sociology you can talk about with that. Yeah. But also, Dwight Gooden winds up being someone who has a lot of drug problems, kind of falls out of the league for a number of years, had never absolutely like reached the potential that he had for a couple of years, but absolutely did not have the career that a lot of people thought he had. Kicked around the league for a while, and then eventually came back, and yes, with the great Satan, the New York Yankees, but he comes back and throws a no-hitter and is part of a World Series winning team. Yeah. And like, but it was just that is one thing, but like, I know a lot of people who've told me that like in, Narcotics Anonymous, like people like him are often held up as like, look, there's a road back. There is life after addiction. There is life with not after, but with addiction and stuff like that. And obviously that's an extreme example. And there's a lot of controversy with the 12-step programs and all that. But like, you look at something like that, and people like when I went to the Dominican Republic, there's statues to Sammy Sosa because so much of his money was spent investing in baseball stadiums, investing in baseball fields in high schools so that more kids can learn, but also like building hospitals and that money has done some really good things. I'm not saying cut national aid and instead give it all to Dominican baseball players. Like, we should just be funding these things directly. But my point there being that like Sammy Sosa is a role model for a lot of people for that reason. And which is all the more complicated with the steroids and stuff like that, which is another ethical issue. So and I've talked about Jackie Robinson before, and I think I used to be in a place where I was like, no, that for all the problems baseball has, professional sports has, it's still okay because of these reasons. And I think I was being kind of in a pretty defensive place. And I think, and kind of why I kind of want to check back in on this topic once a year or so. I think it's better to have the kind of the approach you have that you were just talking about of like, there are a lot of problems and it could be a lot better. And I'm not sure if it's necessarily like the most ethical thing that's out there, but it's something I've loved since I was a kid. It's something that I still really enjoy. I try to find ways to ethically engage with it that are better than others. And I think part of that is being honest and talking about the ethical problems that there are and maybe seeing if, some of these things can change.
Yeah. I mean, like most things, there is positive and there's negative, right? And I think there's a tendency to try to weigh one against the other and decide which wins out. And fair, I mean, the superhero ethics thing here, like the logo on the, the stream, like there's some scales, right? Scales of justice, right? But like, that's kind of just never really been the way I try to evaluate things. I mean, I do think like when it comes to decisions, right? Just do I want to put my money into this or do I want to put my time into this? Like that's fair, deciding whether whether the sum of those things is like over a certain threshold that makes you say, no, I don't want to invest in that, right? But I think just in terms of evaluating something, it's like, I just think it's always important to acknowledge the good and the bad, or what you regard as good and bad. And then just decide, the sum of that, but they don't cancel each other out, right? Like just because there's a good side doesn't mean the bad side's not real. And just because there's a bad side doesn't mean the good side's not real, right? Both are happening at the same time. And I think the only way you can really have a clear picture of reality or an honest conversation of what's really going on is to accept all of them.
Yeah. And then it's nuanced. And that,
exactly.
I do like that image. And there's one way of seeing that image that we have in my logo of the guy like bursting through the wall. But I also kind of see him pinned to the wall sometimes, which I think is a part of the, like, if you do see things just in that justice, like good or bad, right versus wrong, when the reality is it's so much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And I want to get into some of those complications. I'll just say kind of an interesting note. We're recording this on March 31st. And one of the big news stories in the world of sports, not baseball, but still, is that the Chicago Bulls cut one of their players, just like ended the contract. He is off the team. It's the middle of the season. Now, he's not one of their best players by any means, and the Chicago Bulls aren't one of the best teams, but still, because he made a whole bunch of anti-gay and anti-Catholic statements. And they made very clear that's why that happened. And is this like the victory we've all been looking for queer rights? Absolutely not. The Supreme Court made a anti-trans decision today that's much more important to what we should talk about. But I do think it's a way in which sports are kind of an interesting barometer, of like 20 years ago, I don't think we would have ever met, the idea that a person would be literally kicked off a sports team, not even re-signed, but like more that was done to Colin Kaepernick. Like Colin Kaepernick was screwed, absolutely. But he got to finish his contract. Like they ended his contract the day after he made anti-gay and anti-Catholic statements. And that's this interesting sign of progress. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just, those are, I don't know the exact specifics of this exact situation.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things I have a lot of mixed feelings about.
That there's speech implications, there. I get that,
and particularly the relationship between employers and employees and all that, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. Let's not pursue that tangent.
Yeah, that's fair. It's an offhand comment. I don't know too much about it, and I'll admit, if he was the top scorer for the Bulls and was carrying them to the playoffs,
would Colin Kaepernick have ended up the same way if he was, the best quarterback in the league?
Yeah, if you and the flip side also being, this is a guy who was coming to the end of his contract. Now a whole bunch of people on the right are demanding that their team sign this guy. So it's all cynical.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the example that you brought up of the stadiums, because I was actually reading a story about a team that I know is dear to your heart, the Kansas City Royals.
Yeah.
And the way it was framed, I thought was so interesting, which is that and it was I think an ESPN or one of the other major sports publications, and the title was something like, Royals worry as their lease comes to an end.
Yeah.
And so first of all, there's a sense of urgency there. I read more in the story. Their lease is ending in 2031.
Yeah, that's not too soon.
Yeah,
but also it takes a while to build a stadium.
It takes a while to build a stadium, and I guess I'm not sure what's happening with their current stadium, Kauffman Stadium. They apparently decided it's just not possible to extend there. I don't know what the details are there, but again, it's like, if that's a possibility, then maybe 5 years isn't too long.
Right.
But part of why this is happening is that, and I think a really positive move, they had a plan to build it in a certain part of the Kansas City area. They're in Missouri, and this was for those who don't know, Kansas City,
Missouri. Yeah.
Basically, it's on both sides of the river. There's a Kansas City, Missouri, and a Kansas City, Kansas, and they've considered going to both. But there was one part of the city that they were planning to go to, and there was a vote because the city would basically have to put in a new tax to pay for this.
Right.
And there's a lot of debate over whether that's worth it or not. But the people rejected it.
Yeah.
And so ESPN was talking, and the way they talked about it was in this and it's the poor Royals that are in this situation. The Royals are one of the least monetarily successful teams in baseball. They're often referred to as kind of like they don't get to pay for the big stars and stuff like that. They are still a corporation that is bringing in billions of dollars, that is owned by billionaires, making incredible amounts of money. Talk about this stadium issue and kind of all that's going on there, because it seemed to me, I looked at that and I was like, that's a victory. I'm glad to see citizens starting to stand up and be like, yes, we like having a team. We like having the stadiums in certain places, and sometimes they can be economically beneficial, but making us pay for it just automatically is not necessarily the way we should go.
Yeah. Like a lot of things, I think it's a bit complicated. I do come from the default position of, like, a city shouldn't be buying $100 million, things for hundreds of millions of dollars for a private corporation that basically makes their money off of the goodwill of the constituency, essentially. Right. At the same time, I do feel like the Kansas City and Kansas City, Missouri is like the real Kansas City, and like Kansas City, Kansas is like the suburbs kind of. More, right? Like, I think people, like, if you didn't grow up there or visit a lot or like know people from there, like, I think you'd probably think Kansas City, Kansas was like the main
it's
one.
In the name. Yeah.
Right. But it was probably named because it was the city on the edge of Kansas in Missouri, right? And then it extends into Kansas and whatever. And there's literally just a road that's like State Line Road or whatever. Yeah. And you just drive across it. It's not like a river. I
thought literally the river divided the two.
I don't think so. No. The Missouri River is. Wait, am I wrong? I'm gonna have to look at a map of.
Because the thing I was reading was saying they could also go across the river to Kansas.
Yeah, I mean there is a river, but there's at least areas where there's just a like a road, like State Line Road, and you just drive across it. Yeah, there is the Missouri River.
Yeah, divided by the state line. You're right. Okay.
Right. No, but so in one part, I think the river is the divider, and then in the majority of Kansas City, North Kansas City is separated from Kansas by the Missouri River. But then the Missouri River winds, and I think it's probably like a tributary of the Mississippi, which I think divides St. Louis and like East St. Louis in Missouri. And anyway, enough geography, probably, right? Even though, I mean, this is kind of a geographical discussion, right? But the point is, like, you just drive across State Line Road. That is actually what it's called. And then, like, you're in Kansas City, Kansas, right? And
I mean, these things generate huge amounts of tax revenue. And so, and there are a lot more Kansas City Royals fans probably living in the state of Missouri. And so if Kansas City, if the team moved across the river, now Missouri's tax base has taken a hit. The state of Kansas has gained a huge tax base, and it is mostly, so there's
a lot going on.
Absolutely.
But also, like, Kansas City is a city, like the Kansas City Monarchs were, I believe, one of the most successful Negro Leagues teams. Right. Absolutely. And so there's this long history of Kansas City baseball. And then I think there were the Kansas City Blues, who were like a Yankees farm team. And then there was the Kansas City Athletics, who had moved from Philadelphia, who were basically a Yankees farm team. Sadly, that was always the joke. And then there were the Kansas City Royals, who have been around for a while now. Right. And so, like, baseball in Kansas City is like, it's a big deal. And like moving it from Missouri to Kansas is also a big deal. So the way I see it, moving from, I mean, it's not like moving from Oakland to Las Vegas, right? And I think that situation where, the Oakland A's, the owner basically was like, we want to move. And he was like, but he was trying to like get them to build him an expensive stadium. But I think he never really wanted them to, because he always wanted to move to Vegas. And everything just like fell through to where now they're in West Sacramento for however long. And then they are eventually, in theory, moving to Vegas. But it's like they're playing in a minor league stadium now. And so, as the Royals, you see this 5 years off and you're like, we don't want to be them.
Right.
Basically, right.
I do want to talk a little bit more about the Oakland thing, because I think that's actually a great example of kind of the worst of the worst here. He wanted to move. He was told no. And there's a whole bunch of politics here that go into it as well. Oakland is part of the Bay Area. San Francisco Bay Area. But it's traditionally always been, it's kind of like if Brooklyn hadn't united with Manhattan.
Brooklyn was its own city, and then it joined. It's
its own city, but it's part of the larger metropolitan area. But it's also a very strong, it is also one of the largest Black communities outside of New York and the South and some other places like that. It was the home of the Black Panthers, and I don't know if it was founded there. Just a lot of the big people there. It has a very strong history in those things, and it is like, if you think about all the money in the Bay Area, the fact that Oakland doesn't have a share of that money is a very political thing. So there's all sorts of issues that go into that. And then, but for a while, there was a very dedicated fan base. I mean, go watch Moneyball. Like, the movie's not entirely accurate by any means, but like the Oakland A's fans loved that team and loved that stadium. I went to that stadium 20 years ago. It was horrible. It was directly in the sunlight for day games in really uncomfortable ways. There was very bad accommodations and things like that. And the owner made a conscious choice, and is on the record with some of this stuff, to not improve the stadium in any way. Because he went to Major League Baseball, said, "Can I move?" And they said, "No, Oakland is a great place to have a team. There's been a great history there. Reggie Jackson, like so much history there." And so he basically let the stadium fall apart. He let the team fall apart, refusing to spend money to get good players or to keep the players that his team was growing. It became much worse Moneyball. And so attendance went down, until eventually he was able to say, look, there isn't a fan base that can support a team in Oakland. Let me move. So, like, if you've seen the movie Major League, like, it's just a literal plot of Major League.
It's just, he just ripped it right out of the movie.
He did the opposite of a speed run. He did it over like 5 years instead of one season, so it wasn't as obvious. But so to me, that's the kind of like, this can get really, and when you think about, like, there is a connection between a team and its area, and I think there's a responsibility there, and that's heartbreaking for the people. You talk to people in Baltimore. It's been, I think, 40 years since the Baltimore Colts left in the middle of the night to go to Indianapolis. But like, that's how important that connection was. The moving trucks had to show up in the middle of the night because there would have been so much anger if they any other time. So
it's funny that the Athletics, when the owner, I think Peter Fisher, is it John Fisher?
John Fisher,
wrote a thing like, basically, thanks for blah blah blah. We're moving. The Athletics have a long history of moving cities from Philadelphia to Kansas City to Oakland. It's like, yeah, you made people mad every time.
Yeah,
like people in Kansas City were mad that you moved the Athletics.
Yeah.
That's somebody else. That I think it might have been Charlie Finley. Was it Finley? I think it might have been Finley.
And that happened in like the 50s, early 60s, when like a bunch of teams were moving to California because all of a sudden with, plane travel, that was possible.
Right.
The A's were winning World Series in the early 70s in Oakland.
Yeah. They were very successful in Oakland. Yeah.
80% of the fans don't have any memory of the A's in any place except Oakland.
Right. I mean, of today's fans. Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the stadium thing is one kind of major ethical issue that comes up with baseball.
I just wanted to mention that you had asked me recently, like whether I knew about Satchel Paige's last professional outing, or last Major League Baseball appearance, which was in 1965, at the age of 58.
Yeah. Now, Satchel Paige is one of those people who. Recently, baseball has made some changes to accommodate this, but like some of the greatest baseball players of history were not anywhere in the record books because they were playing in the Negro Leagues before Jackie Robinson and before baseball was integrated. And Satchel Paige was someone who did eventually come over to the major leagues, but I think he was like 38 or something. Like most of his career was.
He was 41.
He was
41 when he made his major league debut, and he pitched for 4 seasons, and then he came back. 5 seasons, and then he came back 12 years later.
Yeah. So talk about what happened when he came back 12 years later.
Yeah. So first of all, he had pitched for the Kansas City Monarchs.
Yeah.
And for a number of years, like I think he ended his Negro League career in Kansas City. Then he played for Cleveland, then the St. Louis Browns, and then I was talking to my mom about it because she had this memory of her dad being like, "That's the greatest pitcher who ever lived." And her dad had been a pitcher, like in like a semi-pro ball or whatever when he was younger. And we figured it out. We were like, yeah, it had to be that last appearance. Like my mom was at Satchel Paige's last appearance in the major leagues at the age of 58 in 1965. And oh, by the way, he pitched 3 innings and gave up no runs, which is phenomenal.
And I think was he playing against the Carl Yastrzemski Red Sox? He's playing against a really good team.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure I have the game log right here, but that sounds right. I looked it up recently. I looked at the box score, and it's just like 58. Like, and I'm not trying to say like 58 is so old for like a human, but for a professional athlete, let alone a baseball player, a pitcher,
41 is ancient for a pitcher.
Yeah,
and that let alone 50 like that. Yeah, it was 100% meant to be a publicity stunt.
Right. And then he got a bunch of people out, so anyway, so that's the history of baseball in Kansas City. The Negro Leagues Museum is in Kansas City, I believe.
Yeah.
So moving from Missouri to Kansas, like I think it seems like it shouldn't be that big a deal. But like how did people in New York feel when the Jets and the Giants moved to the Meadowlands in New Jersey?
I mean, there was definitely some people who were upset. I think that is somewhat different because, a baseball team plays 81 games over the course of a year.
Yeah.
A football team,
81 home games.
81 home games.
And then 81 road games. Yeah.
A baseball team plays 8 games. Which is part of why building a football stadium.
It's just, you
basically have to do is build like the only way to make a stadium make sense as a football stadium. And this is also true for a lot of baseball stadiums is like, yes, 8 days during the year, it's going to be a football stadium, but it's also going to be where Taylor Swift and, any big national tour, that's the place they're going to go to.
Yeah. When our friend was playing with Taylor Swift in Vegas and I was still there, like they were at the Raiders Stadium, the Raiders are only there like 8 times a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also worth noting, and I think we don't really know exactly what we're going to cover for today, and we don't have too much more time, so we may just focus on the stadium issue, but it covers so much of baseball. Mm-hmm. Like any conversation, this is one that is really hard to take to Twitter because is the overall practice of teams kind of using the emotional connection and the financial connections to blackmail cities into paying for their stadiums a terrible thing? Absolutely. And when I say the financial connections, like, it's not just, again, all those players are spending lots of money in that city, but also how many people make money, on all the things around it. Like, in cities where there's a downtown stadium, every like church and school, if they're not open at the time of a game, turns their parking lot into paid parking, and like that can be a significant part of an income for a small organization or something like that, YMCA or whatever it is. But also the people who sell hot dogs, the people who sell t-shirts, the people who, whatever it is. But that being said, there are ways in which putting a stadium into a particular part of a city, particularly when the team is willing to invest in ways, can actually be a really good thing for that area.
Sure.
San Francisco, I think, is often held up where I was living in San Francisco at around the time that the new stadium opened, and it was a pretty bad part of town. And there was a lot of economic redevelopment, and there was a lot of and I think the city paid for a lot of it, but the team also paid for a lot of it. And, they built in new public transportation that goes to that area. And, it's a much better part of town now. Now, the flip side being, when I say much better part of town, if you think that sounds an awful lot like gentrification, Matthew,
sure
sometimes
do.
It really is. In San Francisco, they worked a lot with the existing local businesses to try to make sure it wasn't the case. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
And so I think, and there used to be this trend of putting all these stadiums out in the suburbs. There's now a trend towards putting the stadiums right in the middle of downtown of cities, which, by the way, might not sound like a big thing until you think, let's say 10,000 people drive their cars to a stadium. If 81 times a year, 10,000 people are driving a car versus now the stadium's in the middle of the city and they're taking public transportation, that's not an insignificant decrease in traffic.
Yeah, that's true.
So there are just all these different factors, but to me, I think the whole stadium discussion has highlighted the way that the economics of baseball is really built around this idea of a public trust. And that's how I think when you read the discussions when that monopoly rule was passed in Congress, there was this idea of like baseball is part of our traditions and it's part of our local cultures, and that these teams have a responsibility to that. Yeah. And I think that's what something like this Kansas City thing is looking at, is like, when you think about how much goodwill multiple generations of like your grandfather to your mother to you have given to these teams, and then can they just do what Oakland did and leave in the middle of the, or Baltimore did, and now Indianapolis.
Yeah. And I just brief aside, I went to a game with you in San Francisco at the then new ballpark. Beautiful ballpark, and also Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, beautiful ballpark. And that's, I think, one of the things that does strike me about stadiums is like when they're nice. I mean, I grew up going to Shea Stadium, which was not a cathedral. It was but to me it had like the grit of New York. It was that broken down couch that you just have fallen in love with, and every time a guest comes over, they're like, they're like, what is this place? You're like, no, this is the place. You got to see. Just wait till the upper deck is shaking from everybody, cheering or whatever, and Enter Sandman playing with Billy Wagner coming out. Yes, Billy Wagner had Enter Sandman. It wasn't just Mariano Rivera. Anyway, but like there's an architectural component too, to like when you have big public venues, which then for a stadium for a team is like kind of private, but like that's something about the city, right? Like that's a big part of the city. And there's a question recently on Jeopardy about the Beatles like first like really big stadium concert, and nobody got it, or the first person that got it. I was like, how do you not know that Shea Stadium? But they didn't know. Whatever, fine. But like that's like an iconic concert in music history, and I think stadiums are able to like be a really interesting feat of architecture. And so just figuring out the economics of it is tricky. And I kind of wish that these stadiums were owned by the public, leased to sports teams, but also that the sports teams weren't allowed to move.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the Oakland A's should have been allowed to move. No, you bought the Oakland A's. You need to stay. And if you wanted a Las Vegas team, you should have said, hey, I want to start a Las Vegas team. How about you do some expansion? Which, like, by the way, this is the longest that Major League Baseball has gone without expansion since it started expansion.
Right.
And if you look at the percentage, like you divide the number of people in the United States by the number of teams, it's, I think, higher than it's ever been, that number of how many people per team. So, like if you want a team in a new place, put a team in a new place. Great. I think it would be lovely to have a team in Las Vegas. It shouldn't be the Athletics.
Yeah.
It should be, the Las Vegas Coolers or something.
Well, and we're coming up on this. There's be a whole other topic, but like we're coming up on the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners ends at the end of this year.
I see.
And some of the things that are, and there's a lot of discussion. There might be a work stoppage again.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the issues are over things like salary caps and salary floors. And the Los Angeles Dodgers are pretty clearly the best team in baseball. And it's not just because they buy the best players. They're phenomenally run. They have a very good farm system. And they buy all the best players.
Yeah. They do everything right. And then they also have extra assets to cover up anything that doesn't work.
And part of that is because they're more willing to spend, like the teams in Oakland when they were there, or Kansas City or Tampa Bay could spend more money, but the Los Angeles Dodgers make a lot more money than the Kansas City Royals are ever going to.
Yeah. And the Royals do spend more than some of those smaller market teams.
Yeah. And they've been more successful.
Yeah.
And so that's another part of the discussion that I think is really important, is things like salary floors of, because like I said, the Fisher intentionally tanked his team so that fans would lose interest.
Yeah.
And as a way of saying, no, look, there isn't a big fan. And I think, to me, and I'm a fan of some other sports, like I do think Woody Johnson wants to be a good owner for the New York Jets. I don't think he's intentionally tanking the team. He's doing more to hurt New York Jets' interest than John Fisher could ever imagine. But like I think owning a team should be more of a public trust, and like there should be more ways of saying, like, hey, if you're not running this team in a way that the local fan base is supporting, like, this isn't just a business. That's the whole point. This should be some kind of, like, technically all the teams are nonprofits. No, I'm sorry. The major sports, like MLB itself is a nonprofit.
Right,
the NFL itself is a nonprofit. Which are ridiculous things.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be better if instead of teams being owned by billionaires, they were owned by cities. Like,
which there is one team in professional sports that's true of, the Green Bay Packers.
Right.
They are like, I have friends who own shares. It is a publicly owned, but it's not, you can't like buy it on the stock market because it's not, it's a nonprofit. There's no like value to their shares.
Right. Yeah.
But
I mean, that raises its own questions too,
Yeah.
I mean, if they were owned by the cities, as opposed the way the Green Bay Packers makes more sense, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But like the fans get to, like, when they hire, like they don't like vote on, who's going to play second base tomorrow or who's going to start running back next week. But like they do vote on the leadership group. And when the team's been really bad, the owners have all come together like a stockbroker meeting, literally it is, and voted them out and voted in new team leadership. And,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It would be nice if more teams were run in a similar fashion.
I mean, it might mean that Steve Cohen was voted out, which I think would have been a bad thing. But,
I mean, as a Mets enjoyer, he's the benevolent billionaire for the Mets, which like who, maybe have had some SEC violations for insider trading or whatever, but as long as he's spending his billions on the Mets players, like,
our last owners were spending their billions with Madoff. So, this is an improvement.
Exactly. Yeah. But he does say, like, I view, owning a team as like the goal should be to have it as more of a philanthropic kind of like a stewardship for the city, for the fan base, not like I'm trying to make as much money from the team as, I mean, the Mets might be one of the few Major League Baseball teams that are losing money. Like we don't know if they are, because none of them give their book, only the Atlanta Braves, I think, have open books because they're like owned by a publicly traded company, I think. But
Well, and it also becomes a thing of like short-term versus long-term investment, in that like
yeah.
Part of why the Dodgers make so much money is because everyone knows the Dodgers are so good. And so people around the world are buying Dodgers merchandise.
Yeah.
I'm buying Mets merchandise because I think the team is really like, if a team is investing in itself, I'm willing to invest in the team. And if the
you're paying a part of Bichette's salary by getting this
Kansas City Royals became, the dominant juggernaut in sports for the next 20 years, you'd see people like walking down Hollywood Boulevard wearing, blinged out Kansas City hats,
Sure, yeah. I mean, Taylor Swift was at, I think, one of these KC games with Travis Kelce because
she went to all the games.
Yeah, because the playoff games or whatever, right?
Yeah, that playoff and the regular season games. And then, I mean, that's a whole other issue. There were people who were yelling and screaming about this is such woke bullshit because the cameras keep focusing on Taylor during the games. I think the most was that the cameras went on her for like 47 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I did mean the Royals games, right? Not the Chiefs games. Like,
okay. She go to Royals games too.
Yeah, I think they both. I think went to Royals games during the playoffs a couple years ago. But I one of my favorite tweets I've ever seen was congratulations to Taylor Swift on her Super Bowl victory in her first season in the NFL.
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do. I love it. All right. Well, I have another podcast and we'll start recording in just a few minutes. But any last things you want to say, Paul, on the just small narrow topic of baseball ethics?
Yeah. I didn't think we would talk so much about Taylor Swift, but I like watching baseball. I don't always liking watching baseball.
Yeah.
And I try not to get my feeling of self-worth from how the team that I enjoy is doing. But I think like any kind of media, it's like, be conscious of what's going on in the production of that and think about that and, voice your opinion when you think something's not kosher, I guess. And, but also like, it's okay to enjoy things, right? Like I feel like this sort of being defensive thing is it feels a little weird to me because I don't feel like I've ever usually done that. I understand kind of the world that we're sort of speaking in is that's kind of a thing. But like the main thing to me is like, like observe the good and the bad and just call it like it is. And the Texas Rangers apparently put a statue for some Texas Ranger who is famous for having helped enforce segregation after being ordered by the Supreme Court to end segregation. So like that's a new statue in the Texas Rangers stadium, which
and I think like not just like like I think killed like there was a police shooting that he was involved in that is like looked at as very, very questionable and that part of it might be
sounds likely. I don't know.
There's a whole bunch of terrible stuff about it. I'll link to an article about it and I'll correct that if I'm wrong. But so it's not a good thing by any means. This is
right. Yeah. It was a statue that was taken down in 2020 from an airport due to complaints about who the statue was of, and it's supposed to represent the Rangers, which then also is like, so you're naming your baseball team after a law enforcement organization. Fantastic.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Yeah, and I was like. I think for both of us, there probably is a red line somewhere of like, if the Mets did something like that we might be like, I don't know if I can keep, doing this. And that's an important thing to have. And I'll also say that's the kind of the ethical side, but there's also the kind of like the emotional masochistic side we talked about. A lot of sports fandom can get to really problematic places. I've certainly been there. Paul is emotionally steady all the time. So
always.
He's a monk. I'm kidding. No, sort of. But I just like to tease him about it. But but if you want to know more about that, there's a great movie called Fever Pitch, the English version. I think the American version's fine, but the English version really dives into this. And we did a podcast about that a couple months back. So I'll link to an episode about that. Because we were in a somewhat emotionally compromised state due to our team not doing
it was right after that. Yeah. That's what I was like, I'm never watching sports again.
No, I think anyway, well, I made a joke recently that the Oscars make me feel the way Republicans feel about the NFL, which is that every year the wrong person wins, and I'm like, the Oscars are so racist, blah blah blah. I'm never watching this again. And then next year they do something else, and I'm like, I'm never watching this again. And someone's like, well, did you say that? Shut up, You look at how many there's so many Republicans who are saying now that like they'll never watch basketball. Well, that is a different channel. Cut that out.
Well,
but yeah, like you get my point. So
I do. And I feel that way about the Oscars, but I have never watched them again.
Yeah.
I think the last time I saw anything of the Oscars was when my wife had them on and Moonlight won, but La La Land got the thing, and they're like, "Can't we just give it to both?"
Yeah, I don't watch it anymore, but I still follow. I care about the results, and I keep saying I should stop caring. But
fair enough. Yeah,
Sinners was the best movie of the year. That's end of story. All right,
I saw it and it was great. That's all I know. I don't know what else was even nominated. So
with that, thank you all so much. Let's go, Mets.
LFGM.